Fine. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Arafat, and I teach history on the textbook platform. So, in this session, let us continue with our French Revolution. So, uh, let me repeat once again. So, uh, my name is Arafat, and in the last couple of classes, we have started our discussion on the French Revolution, on the French Revolution. So, in fact, so far we have discussed two classes on. We had two sessions on the French Revolution. The French Revolution topic it takes some time for us to complete because it is a very lengthy topic. So it will take not less than 3 to 4 hours to complete the French Revolution. And so far, we had uh, two sessions. We had discussed the two sessions on. We had two sessions on French Revolution in our previous week. So the class which we are having today is the continuation of the lectures on the French Revolution series. So this is basically the lecture third. This is the lecture 3 on the French Revolution. So those students who have not watched lecture 1 and lecture 2 on the French Revolution, you kindly watch it before watching this uh, this third lecture on the French Revolution. So the French Revolution is a very important landmark in the history of the world history. So there are various other events of the world which are intimately connected to the French Revolution, and hence, for us to have a proper understanding of the other events of the world, we should have a very good, detailed understanding of the French Revolution. That's the reason why we are spending so much time on this topic. So the time period of French Revolution is between 9 to about 18. So this period, history of France, is referred to as a period of French Revolution, 1709 to 1815. So far, we have discussed the causes of the French Revolution. This part we have already discussed. Then we have discussed the formation of a national constituent assembly. Basically, we have discussed first the causes of the French Revolution. Then thereafterwards, we have discussed the rule of France by National Constituent Assembly between 1789 to 1791. So basically, France between 1789 to 1791 was ruled by uh, National Constituent Assembly. This part also we have completed. So uh, thereafterwards, France between 1791 1792 was ruled by legislative assembly. This part also we have discussed in our previous. So far, we have completed these three aspects. So we have discussed the causes of the French Revolution. Then we have discussed the rule of France 1789 to 1791 by National Constitution. Then thereafterwards, France between 1791 to 1792 was ruled by a legislative body called Legislative Assembly. But even this Legislative Assembly came to an end in 1792. So kindly you watch our previous two lectures for a better understanding on the topic of French Revolution. Come to lecture 3, which is the continuation of the same French Revolution series. What happened? So basically, I told you uh, in 1792, basically in 1792, the Legislative Assembly was abolished, and in its place, a new body was created to rule France. So basically, Legislative Assembly was abolished in 1792 AD, and France, uh, 1792 to 1795, was ruled by another executive body called as a National Convention. Basically, France 1792 to 1795 was ruled by a new body called National Convention. So this is what we will be discussing in today's class. National Convention, what the important developments in the time period of National Convention is what we will be discussing in today's class. So basically, after the abolition of the Legislative Assembly, I told you in the third topic, I just told you between 1791 to 1792, France was ruled by Legislative Assembly, but in 1792, Legislative Assembly was abolished, and therefore, this abolition of Legislative Assembly initiated the formation of a National Convention, necessitated the formation of another body called a National Convention, and therefore, in 1792 itself, in September 1792, elections were conducted to the National Convention, and the elections were conducted to the National Convention. In these elections, mostly radical groups of France, like the Jacobins and the Girondins, got elected. Let me repeat the point once again. In September 1792, elections were held to the National Convention at the point. And in this National Convention, uh, two radical Republican groups, namely the Jacobins, as well as the Girondins got elected. This is what happened as a result of elections to the National Convention. Now let us discuss some important work carried out by the National Convention. So I already told you the National Convention comprised of radical Republican groups, that is the Jacobins and the Girondins. So these two groups were opposed to constitutional monarchy. They were opposed to constitutional monarchy, and it is these two groups that got elected to the National Convention. They now take a look at some very important during the time period of National Convention. I told you National Convention time period is 1790 to 1795. So what actions did the National Convention take? Take a look at these developments. One, monarchy was abolished and France was declared as a republic. Because the point is, the radical Republicans, that is the Jacobins, uh, the Girondins, were in favor of France becoming a republic. So after the abolition of a legislative assembly, the National Convention elections were held, and two Republican groups, one is Jacobins and second is Girondins, mostly they got elected, and immediately, since they were in majority, they abolished monarchy from France and made France as a republic. At the point. Then, second important decision was they also abolished the first constitution. So basically, just go back to our classes and see. Basically, in 1791, a new constitution was prepared at the point. So this new constitution was abolished in 1792. New constitution, which we call as the first constitution, was abolished in 1792. This was abolished by none other than the National Convention. And third, National Convention began to take strict action against the church. It began to take action against the church. This was because most of the members of the National Convention happened to be atheist. They had absolutely no regard for Christianity, and they were atheist, and they began to take action against the church. Basically, they initiated the program of de-Christianization of the French society. Repeat, the third important work carried out by the National Convention was de-Christianization. Basically, the members of the National Convention were atheists, both the Jacobins and the Girondins, both were atheists, and therefore they began initiating an action against the church. They initiated the program of de-Christianization of the French society. So, what all did they do? Basically, they began to close down the church. Instead, they began using church. They converted church. They converted the churches into jails. Told you here repurposed. Repurposed means they began to close down the churches. They began to convert the churches into jails. This was the first step. Second, they even uh, introduced a new republican calendar in which the Christian holidays were eliminated. Basically, the second step which the uh, National Convention took was that they introduced a new French republican calendar in which the Christian holidays were eliminated. At the point. So basically, the National Convention um, declared the worship of liberty, equality, fraternity, and reason as more important than the worship of God. Told you the slogans of a French Revolution were liberty, equality, and fraternity. At a point. So we have already discussed about role of a French Enlightenment. Uh, uh, we have already discussed about the role of uh, an intellectual by name Voltaire, who emphasized on reason. So basically, the the members of the National Convention were greatly inspired by call for reason. The members of the National Convention were greatly inspired by uh, uh, the call given by Voltaire to to evaluate everything uh, through the prism of reason at a point. So basically, the National Convention declared that the worship of liberty, equality, and fraternity, as well as reason, were more important than that of worship of. So basically, they began to initiate action of. They began to initiate program of decrease at a point. Then what was the reaction from the people? What was the outcome? So these actions of the National Convention began to severely hurt sentiments of the religious citizens, not the one who were not religious, but these actions of the convention, they began to severely hurt the religious of religious sentiments. Therefore, gradually, the religious citizens of France began to gradually move away from the national. Basically, they began to uh, the National Convention began to lose the support of the religion because of the actions which it had taken against the church. Fourth, the fourth and possibly the most important action taken by the National Convention was against the king. I told you since very long time, France was a monarchy. So in 1792, the ruler of France was one Mr. Louis XVI. Louis Louis XVI. Louis XVI was the ruler in 1792. So basically, uh, the the National Convention began to take strict action against the king as well as the queen. Basically, the National Convention uh, accused both the king and the both the king and the queen uh, as traitors. Basically, the National Convention held both the king and the queen as traitors. They also accused them of conspiring with the foreign powers to bring down the revolution in France. Because it was in 1709 the revolution broke out in France. So it was after the 1789 revolution in France that absolute monarchy France came to an end, and France became a constitutional monarchy. This is what happened in France in 1789. So in 1789, after the revolution, uh, the absolute monarchy in France ceased, and France became a constitutional monarchy. And France remained a constitutional monarchy between 1789 to 1790. But in 1792, what happened? The National Convention abolished even the constitutional monarchy and made France as a republic at a point. So basically, the National Convention held both the king and the queen as traitors. They held both the king and the queen as conspiring with the foreign powers, namely Austria and Prussia, to end the revolution in France. This was an accusation leveled against the king and the queen. Both were arrested, both the king and the queen were arrested, uh, and both were charged with treason. Both were given death sentence and executed in 1793. So both the king and the queen were charged with treason. They were given death sentence after a nominal trial, and both of them were hanged in 1793 at a point. So that was what the convention did against the ruler of France, that is Louis XVI. This happened in 1793 AD. So what was the reaction? So what was the reaction of the people to the actions of the National Convention? So basically, the actions of the National Convention did not further the cause of the revolution. Instead, it involved revolution, great danger, both at home, that is within France, as well as abroad. So the whole point which I'm these actions taken by the nation did not further the cause of revolution. Revolution, basically the revolution aimed at establishing republic in France, but the actions of the National Convention did not take forward the objectives of the revolution. Instead, it involved revolution in great danger. The danger to the revolution came from within home as well as from abroad. So let us take a look at the reaction to the activities of the National Convention. We discuss in the two factors. One is internal reaction, the other is external reaction. The internal reaction is the reaction of the people of France to the activities of the national. Basically, the people of France, particularly the religious citizens, the moderates, and those who supported monarchy, began to turn against the National Convention. So basically, because of the activities of the National Convention, there was a widespread uproar within France against the activities of the National. Many sections of the French society, particularly the moderate individuals, even the moderate Girondins, even the royalists, that is, people who supported monarchy, as well as religious individuals, began to turn against national, began to turn against republic. At a point, because they held the Republican France as responsible for uh, the death of the king and the queen. So basically, large-scale internal disturbances broke out in France due to the actions of the National Convention. And then how about the external reaction? Basically, the monarchs of Europe, because back in those days, uh, most of the world was, in fact, under the rule of the monarchs. So when the other rulers of Europe were very much shocked when they heard the news of the execution of the king and the Queen of France. The other rulers of France, the other rulers of Europe were very much shocked when they heard the news of the execution of the French king and the queen. Immediately, they declared that they would teach a lesson to the Republican France. Basically, they declared that they would teach a lesson to Republican France. This is what the reaction that began to come from abroad to the activities of the National Convention. What activities? We have just discussed the activities of the National Convention. So, how did the National Convention react? Basically, to effectively handle the national internal threat to the Republic, basically, what was the objective of the Jacobins and the Girondins? The basic objective of the Jacobins and Girondins was to save Republic because they were die-hard Republicans. They were die-hard Republicans. Their only objective was to save Republic at any. So, but due to their actions, such as their role in de-Christianization of the society and their role in the execution of the king and the queen, widespread revolts broke out against the National Convention, against the Republican France. So the Jacobins and Girondins uh, were very much determined to save Republic at any cost because that was their foremost objective. And therefore, with their objective of saving Republic in France, they were determined enough to put down the internal threats. They were very much determined to put down the revolts within France. So therefore, to effectively uh, suppress the internal disturbances within France, to effectively suppress the internal disturbances in France, particularly the Jacobins, introduced a concept called Reign of Terror. This was the year September 1793. Reign of Terror. Name itself suggests basically they wanted to terrorize the people to not raise their voice against the Republic. That was the object with which the Reign of Terror was introduced. So basically, to effectively suppress the internal disturbances in France, the Jacobins introduced a concept called Reign of Terror in September 1793. Up to a point. And in fact, the Jacobins also established a committee called the Committee of Public Safety. This Committee of Public Safety is basically an executive organ of the National Convention. National Convention is basically a group of elected representatives, but there must be someone uh, uh, to execute the decisions taken by the convention. So basically, the National Convention, dominated by the Jacobins, formed a committee called Committee of Public Safety. Committee of Public Safety is basically an executive organ of the National Convention. At a point. And this Committee of Public Safety was particularly created to effectively put down the internal disturbances within France. At the point. And this committee comprised of 12 individuals and was headed by a radical Jacobin by name Maximilian Robespierre. Name is very, very important. Remember. So this Committee of Public Safety comprised of 12 individuals headed by a very radical Jacobin leader by name Maximilian Robespierre. Point. So basically, this Committee of Public Safety began to arrest people uh, who were suspected to be supporters of monarchy. This Committee of Public Safety began to arrest French citizens who were suspected to be supporters of monarchy or the who were opposed to Republican France. So after a nominal trial, those individuals were sentenced to death, executed by guillotine. Guillotine is basically an instrument which was used to behead the people. Beheading was carried out with the help of this particular instrument. So basically, all those people who were suspected to be uh, opposers of Republican France, or those who sympathized with the monarchy, began to be arrested, and after nominal trial, they began to be executed. They began to be executed by guillotine. At the point. So, for example, within a span of about 10 months after the establishment of the Committee on Public Safety, 5 lakh people were arrested, 25,000 were put to death. 25,000 people were put at the point. So, basically, this was the worst phase in the French Revolution. Basically, the National Convention is basically the most radical phase of the French Revolution. So, what is the time period of French Revolution? French Revolution began in 17, carried out till 1815. But what was the time period of National Convention? National Convention began in 1702 and it ended in 1795. It was during the period that worst were carried out in France. So this period of national convention is basically the most radical phase of the French Revolution, because there was a committee called public safety. A committee of public safety was created to put down the disturbances within France, and this committee began resorting to all kinds of. So I just told you that within 10 months after the establishment of the committee, 5 lakh people arrested, close to 25,000 were put. So the point is, some Girondins are basically the moderate Republicans. They also were the supporters of Republic only, but they were slightly moderate in their approach. The other group that got elected to National Convention happened to be Jacobins. Jacobins, who happened to be radical Republicans. Radical Republican. I hope I'm clear. So the point is, National Convention comprised of members from two political parties. One is the Jacobins, the other is the Girondins. Girondins were also supporters of monarchy. I'm sorry, they were supporters of republic, but they were moderate in their approach. Jacobins, on the other hand, were radical Republican. So basically, these radical republic. The point is, the Girondins, some Girondins even began to find fault with the excesses carried out by the Jacobins. Therefore, even the Girondins were not spared. They too were arrested, and after a nominal trial, even some of the Girondins were sentenced to death, executed by guillotine. This is what happened. So, as a result of this reign of terror, so the internal disturbances France were effectively suppressed. Point is, because of as a result of this terror carried out by the Committee on Public Safety, the internal disturbances in France were effectively brought under control. Then what about the external threat? I told you, uh, I told you that the rulers of Europe were shocked when they learned about the execution of the French king. In fact, they also threatened an intervention in France. The point is, even the Republican France, the point is, even the Republican France gave a call for the end of monarchy from all across Europe. Point is, all parts of Europe was under the rule of the kings. France first became a republic. France first became a republic in 1792, and this Republican France wanted uh, the introduction of a republic in other parts of Europe as well. So therefore, the Republican France gave a call for end of monarchy from entire Europe. It gave a call to the people of Europe to rebel against their respective rulers. Gave a call to the people of Europe to rebel against their respective rulers. So basically, the Republican France was not just happy with just France becoming a republic. It was in favor of uh, introducing republic in other regions of Europe as well. So therefore, these calls given by the Republican France greatly alarmed the rulers of Europe, leading to the formation of a coalition against France called First Coalition. Basically, the calls given by the Republican France alarmed the rulers of other parts of the world, other parts of Europe, leading to the formation of a coalition against France called First Coalition. This first coalition comprised of England was there, Prussia was there, Austria was there, Spain was there, Holland was there. Holland is basically Netherlands. Sardinia was also there. Sardinia is at present part of Italy. Okay, point. Prussia at present is a part of Germany. Present is part of Germany. It used to be a kingdom of Europe at that point of time. So basically, as a result of the call given by the Republican France, the rulers of other parts of Europe came together and formed a coalition against the Republican France. It is called as the First Coalition. This first coalition was formed way back in 1792 itself, and it continued till 1797. So the time period of first coalition is 1792 to 1797. So why was this first coalition formed? Basically, this first coalition was formed with a view to restore monarchy in France. The first coalition declared war on Republican France in an attempt to restore the monarchy in. That was the objective with which the first coalition was founded. At a point. So the Committee of Public Safety, which was basically the executive organ of the National Convention, also started taking energetic steps to fight the foreign invasion, to face the foreign invasion. Basically, the Committee of Public Safety, which was formed as an executive organ of the National Convention, also began to take energetic steps to fight the foreign invasion. At a point, in fact, it did uh, score wonderful victories even against the other uh, countries, kingdoms of Europe. So, for example, I just told you first coalition comprised of all of these countries: England, Prussia, Austria, Spain, Holland, Sardinia, etc. So all of them formed a coalition and declared an invasion on Republican France. But Republican France effectively fought back. For example, Prussia and Spain both were defeated by Prussia and Spain both were defeated by Republican France. After which both signed a peace treaty with it signed a peace treaty with Republican France and withdrew from the war. So basically, Prussia and Spain both were defeated by Republican France. Afterwards, both Prussia and Spain signed a peace treaty with France and withdrew from the war and withdrew from the first coalition. So this was a wonderful victory achieved by Republican France. And second, Holland. In fact, Holland was occupied by the French troops, and thereafterwards, uh, monarchy was abolished in Holland, and Holland was declared as a republic. Basically, a war broke out between Holland and Republican France, in which Holland was defeated. Uh, the ruler of Holland was defeated. Monarchy was abolished in Holland, and Holland was also declared as a republic. At a point, basically, Holland was effectively turned as a puppet state, a satellite state of France. This is what happened. Became effectively a satellite state of France. Then what happened to other members of the first coalition? England, Sardinia, and Austria effectively withdrew from the war. So what are the how many? There are basically 1, 2, 3. These are the three countries. The fourth country is the fifth and the sixth country. So the six countries uh, were part of the first coalition. These are the six countries: 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Of these six countries, Prussia and Spain were defeated. Holland was also defeated, and in Holland, in fact, um, a republican government was established by the French. In fact, Holland became a puppet state, a satellite state of France. But England, Sardinia, and Austria effectively withdrew from the war. This is what happened. So basically, the the National Convention achieved or scored wonderful victories uh, uh, against the foreign invaders. The National Convention also succeeded in successfully putting down the disturbances within France. You know why the disturbances occurred within France, and you know why the first coalition was formed, and why it declared war against France. Then the point is, even though both the internal disturbances as well as external threat to France came, let me repeat, even though both internal disturbances as well as external threat to France came to an end, the, Robespierre, who was in fact the head of the Committee on Public Safety, I told you, concept called reign of terror was introduced with a view to suppress internal disturbances. And in fact, a committee called Committee of Public Safety was also established. And this Committee of Public Safety was headed by one Mr. Robespierre. Robespierre. So this Committee of Public Safety, by 1794, the Committee of Public Safety effectively suppressed internal disturbances. It also very effectively handled external threat to France. Threat to France coming from the first coalition. So the first coalition. But even after successfully suppressing the internal disturbances and effectively suppressing the external threat to France, Robespierre continued with he continued with the reign of terror in France. Point is, Robespierre continued with his reign of terror because it was during the period of reign of terror. Robespierre enjoyed unlimited powers, so he was not in favor of giving up his powers. Even the uh, even after bringing the entire situation under control, Robespierre continued with his reign of terror. At a point. So, but by 1890, by 1794, the people of France got fed up with the activity of Robespierre. Robespierre himself was caught. A popular revolution. There was the point is, the people of France revolted against Robespierre. Robespierre himself was caught, and he too was, after a nominal trial, Robespierre was sentenced to death and was executed by guillotine. This is what happened. And with this, the reign of terror came to an end. So, what is the Thermidorian reaction? The point is, the people of France got fed up with the uh, the the activities of Robespierre. So the uh, even when there was no need for uh, carrying out the reign of terror, even after suppressing internal disturbances in France, he continued with the same policy of terror. Therefore, the people of France got fed up. They revolted in masse. Robespierre himself was caught. After a nominal trial, he was sentenced to death and was executed by guillotine. With this, the reign of terror came to an end within France. This happened in 1794. So basically, the National Convention was formed in 1792. And this National Convention was formed after the abolition of Legislative Assembly. Because, uh, let me repeat this point once again. So basically, between 1791 to 1792, France was ruled by legislature. And during this period, France was basically a constitutional monarchy. constitutional monarchy. Between 1791 to 1792, France was basically a constitutional monarchy. But the point is, in 1792, in September 1792, legislative assembly was abolished. France was declared uh, as a republic, that we have seen, and that necessitated the framing of a new constitution for France. So basically, in 1792 itself, France was declared as a republic, and hence there was a need for framing a new constitution for France. So, to frame the new constitution for France, the National Convention was established in September 1792. So, this National Convention, the primary task of the National Convention was to frame a new constitution for the Republican France. But the point is, the National Convention could not frame a new constitution till 1795. It could not frame a new constitution till 1795 because of the internal and external challenges to the Republican France. But by 1795, both, in fact, by the end of 1794 itself, both the internal and external challenges to the Republican France were completely addressed at a point. And thereafterwards, the National Convention took up the task of framing a new constitution for the Republican France. So the National Convention at last, finally, after uh, successfully handling both internal and external challenges to Republican France, finally took up the task of framing a new constitution for the Republican France. So we call this constitution as the Constitution of 1795. We call this constitution, basically the new constitution was prepared by the National Convention, and this constitution is called the Constitution of 1795. Otherwise, this is also called as the Constitution of Year Third. Constitution of Year Third. Because this new constitution came into force 3 years after France became a republic in 1792. So when did France become a republic? In 1792, France became a republic. So to frame this new constitution for the Republican France, National Convention was established. But this National Convention finally framed the constitution in 1795. So this constitution is either called as the Constitution of 1795 or the Constitution of the Year Third. It was finally adopted on 22nd August 1795. Take a look at some very important aspects of this constitution. So the point is, the executive power was placed in a directory. This is the first point. So the executive body of France was referred to as a directory at a point. So basically, the Constitution of 1795 created an executive body called directory, comprising of 5 directors. And this executive body, that is the directory, replaced the Committee of Public Safety that was created in 1792 by the National Convention. I hope I am clear. So basically what happened? So the Constitution of 1795 created an executive body called directory. The directory comprised of 5 members, not one, it comprised of 5 members, and this new executive body replaced the erstwhile executive body, that is the Committee of Public Safety. But of the 5 directors, one of the directors would become chief director, and the chief director shall act as the president of France. So there will be 5 directors in the directory. On a rotation basis, one of the 5 directors will become a chief director, and the chief director shall act as the president of France. So basically, the directory was the executive body created by the Constitution of 1795. That's the point. So why was this directory created? Because the point is, this directory was created This directory comprised of 5 people, and this 5-member directory was created to prevent concentration of power in the hands of a single leader or a group, as had happened during the Reign of Terror. So basically, during the Reign of Terror, there was a committee called Committee of Public Safety headed by Robespierre. All the powers were concentrated in the hands of Robespierre. He was the one who created Reign of Terror. To prevent the repetition of such events, a directory was created comprising of 5 people, and was created to prevent concentration of powers in the hands of only one single individual or in a group, because the members of the directory on a rotation basis uh, would on a rotation basis, one of the 5 directors would be declared would become a chief director. He in turn would act as the president of France. This new arrangement was done created to prevent concentration of power. So basically, executive body was created called uh, the directory. That's the point. Then bicameral legislature was also created. House a two chambered legislature was also created. So the first house is the Council of 500. The second house is the Council of Ancient. Importantly, the Council of 500 just proposed the laws, whereas the Council of Ancient would approve the laws, would deliberate on the laws, and would approve the laws. At a point. So again, this step was taken to prevent concentration of power. Why 2 councils were created? Just to ensure that the power is not concentrated in the hands of only one assembly. And thus from happening, 2 councils, 2 legislative councils. Then third, it also provided for complete separation of powers. So the Constitution of 1795 provided for separation of powers between executive, that is the directory, legislature, that is the 2 councils which we just discussed, and the judiciary. Because judiciary was also created as a powerful institution under the 1795 Constitution of France. At a point. So all this was done in response to the concentration of power during the Reign of Terror. This kind of a setup was uh, established in France to prevent concentration of power and misuse of power, as was the case during the Reign of Terror. At a point. So that's all for today. In the next class, tomorrow, we shall meet once again and continue with the rule of the directory. Tomorrow's class will be completing this particular. Take a look at, uh, we will be discussing the rule of the directory. So directory remained in office between 1795 to 7. So in tomorrow's class, we will meet, continue our discussion on the directory. That's all for today. See you in the next class. But for better understanding, I would encourage students to first listen to the first and the second lecture on French Revolution series. Then you attend today's lecture. Tomorrow we'll be discussing the role of the rule of the directory. Then thereafterwards, finally, we will have one more class to discuss the rise of Napoleon. So Napoleon came to power. His period is very, very important, but how come Napoleon once again ended up becoming director? How come Napoleon once again became successful in establishing monarchy in France? If you want to have a proper understanding of that topic, we should first take a very detailed look at the different aspects. That is what we are actually. That's all for today. See you in the next class. But in case if you have any doubts, you raise a question. Any doubts? Anyone? No doubts? That's all for today. See you in the next class.